friend. Welcome to another episode of In the Unfolding of Becoming.
I'm your host, Erica.
Today, we're joined by Joey.
Hi, friend.
How are you? How's your week going?
This week has been okay so far. Nothing too stressful.
That's good.
Yeah, it's flowing.
I like that it's flowing because let me tell you, it's been a week for me, but we'll get into that in another episode. So, Joey, in this podcast, we talk a lot about the unfolding, and the way I describe that is that transition period where we're in the middle, where we've perhaps started a chapter but haven't quite yet arrived at the end of that chapter. So we're in transition, if you will. I'm curious to know, what does the unfolding mean to you?
For my experience, the unfolding has started long time ago, I guess, with what I've gone through. And it really started for me in college. I started to take the role of caretaker early on.
Oh, we're jumping just right into your unfolding.
Oh, I think you wanted me to start right away, girl.
Yes, we'll go wherever you want to take us. I was just wondering what unfolding means to you, but it seems like you want to tell us straight through your story, which is great. I love it. Let's get into it.
So yeah, I guess it started when I was in college, when my dad had his stroke when I was a freshman in college. And then soon after, I also received the news of my mama losing kidney function, eventually losing her ability to have a healthy kidney. And so that transpired my freshman year. First, it started with my dad. And then I think my sophomore year, received news that my mom's kidney wasn't functioning well and that she was going to lose ability to have a healthy kidney, basically. Right when I graduated, she had to be put on a wait list for an organ donor. She was put onto dialysis at that time.
Wow. So you were in college at the time. Were you living in the same state and city that your parents were in, or were you away at college?
I was actually not too far. I was about an hour and a half away, but not too far. So I would see them obviously periodically in college, like on the weekends or when I had breaks. But this was still early on. And so they were still fairly independent and healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't need to visit them too much. They were still able to take care of themselves. My dad did go through rehab early on because of a stroke. It's called hemiparesis, where you have half of your body more disabled, because he lost his ability to drive right away and his eyesight was affected immediately, pretty much. He was zipping around town, San Francisco, working hard, such a hard worker, right? And then for him, life changed within an instant. And because he lost his ability to drive, speech was impaired, and his motor functioning was impaired. And so life changed for him pretty quickly. Me receiving the news as a freshman in college affected us too as a family unit.
Sounds like your dad was going through his own transition, right? From, you describe it as him being somebody who's very active, it sounds like, to now somebody who is dealing with a health challenge, altering his life and the way he's used to living his life. So he's having to transition and has his own unfolding. And then simultaneously, your mom's going through her own unfolding that's also revolving around her health situation. How does this then now impact you and your story and your unfolding and your transition?
I think it's affected my whole life, because just being a caretaker early on in life, right? In college, when everyone's trying to figure out their identity, right? And your identity as a caretaker happens, I think, for most people later in life, but that really started early for me. And, had feelings of isolation and like, oh, why me? Having to almost like live two timelines, a timeline where I was trying to move forward, but another timeline where constantly thinking and worrying about my parents and having feelings of guilt if like I was living my life, if I was gonna be able to take care of them or be there for them. Just a lot of feelings of guilt, I think, in the unfold, if I was like doing the right thing, right? When I moved away, that decision for me to move away from them and live in Southern California, because they lived in San Francisco at that time, the decision to even move further away and do my own thing and live my own life was a big decision. And also the decision to ultimately come back and leave a life that I'd built in Southern California where I was completely happy, perfectly fine. It was a big decision.
So let's unpack this because this is very layered and very complex. So let's go back to when you're essentially a teenager, right? Because you're 19 and you're in college.
Right.
How would you describe your life before this news?
Happy, carefree, absolutely carefree. Going through high school, graduating, being with friends and talking about the latest gossip, just celebrating life. And then moving into college, the excitement of being at university. What is life going to be like in college? Going through normal teen stuff. But when the news hit, the transition all of a sudden into having adult-like responsibilities. When I had to go to rehab with my father, learning early on medical terms like power of attorney. My parents asking me, well, would you like to hold this power of attorney? And my teen brain is like, what do these terms mean? I don't understand this, right? And just having to step into adult responsibilities really early on.
You went from being a daughter to transitioning to being a caretaker.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yeah.
Okay, so then you're in this position where you're learning how to navigate becoming a caretaker. That continues on several years, and then you make a decision of whether or not to move to Southern California. Take us through that timeline. How much after this first occurs and your dad gets a diagnosis and your mom gets a diagnosis, do you then decide to move? And what is the internal process that you go through? You mentioned feeling shame and feeling guilt at some point in making that decision. What's the timeline between that? You get the diagnosis, and then later on, you're navigating through this process of, hey, I still want to live my life. I want to show up for my parents. How much later does that come on?
I guess around like 7 years, because freshman year of college, again, my dad gets sick. Senior year of college, after graduation, 4 years later, my mom gets sick. I stay in San Francisco. I come back to San Francisco for about 2 years working. So about 7 years. But I was at a point in my life I was completely unhappy. And I'm not going to say I'm the only one who was the caretaker. I had the support of my aunt and my uncle, extended family as well. I was still moving through life as a teen, graduating from college, having fun at the same time. But coming back to San Francisco, I wasn't happy. And I wanted to do something different versus what I had chosen for my undergraduate career. And I was back in San Francisco just thinking, what's next for me? I just have to do something for me. I can't be living here in the Bay Area, unhappy, in close proximity of seeing my parents' health decline. I felt like I needed a break from everything. And so I'm like, what do I really want to do? Started digging around, and I actually found what I currently now I'm doing through hindsight, because what I saw with my dad. I was in the hospital setting, and it gave me exposure to a field that I've never been exposed to before. And I was like, well, this is cool. This is probably something that I can pivot to. I enjoy helping people. I really like that aspect of rehab. And maybe that's what I really want to do in life. Applied to grad school and had a lot of mixed feelings about it, and my parents did as well. Actually, when I got accepted, my mom sat me down and she asked me, are you really going to school, or are you just messing around down in Southern California? What's the real reason? She shared disappointment. She shared worry, right? As typical Asian parents. And I told her, this is something I really want to do.
Can you expand on that disappointment of you moving away from your family and the caretaking responsibilities, or something different?
Yeah, I think for Asian families, you're a unit, particularly when there's members of the family sick and people move away, especially children move away. There's a lot of shame with that. There's a lot of disappointment. There's duties that you're supposed to fulfill as a child. to take care of your parents, right? Take care of the elderly. And the idea of moving away is shameful. And it's like, well, why would you do that? Do you not love us anymore? Why would you move further from us when we need you? My mom definitely shared her disappointment, but at the same time, she understood because she wanted me to do something that I did enjoy and love and pursue that. My dad, the same way. They didn't stop me from going, but they definitely shared. I think it was more worry too about what my life was going to be without them fully being there. I always say it's the best decision that I've made for myself in my life.
That's a lot, right? When somebody who you love a lot, who raised you, your parents, are showing disappointment, you know that they need you, and you're also trying to give yourself joy, recognizing, hey, this is the life that you get, and you're trying to make the best out of it. How did you manage that and land in the decision of, I need to do this for myself? And how were you able to dismantle some of that disappointment that was landing on you?
I think just from a point of view where, again, pleasing, right? And because I already majored in a major that was something that my parents approved of, seeking family approval and always doing the right thing and being the good child and following not their dreams, but their wishes instead of mine. And really, for the first time, that decision to follow through with grad school in LA, it was something I was doing for myself. It was not easy standing my ground and making that decision, but I had to do something that was right for me, and it made me feel good.
And how do you think you were able to get there? Because I think this duty and honor and obligation to family is relatable to several cultures.
Sure.
So if we have a friend who's listening and they're currently going through a situation where they're unhappy and they do want to prioritize themselves or do something for themselves that's going to give them joy or is going to be more aligned to the way they want to experience life, but they're carrying this duty, an obligation to family, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of what helped you get to a place where you knew that you needed to do this for yourself and that it did not mean that you didn't love your parents, that you didn't feel that commitment to them, and that you were still going to show up in a different way?
I think it's reframing that guilt, because it was a sense of guilt that I felt that I was leaving the family, but reframing it and thinking about what was best for me. Because if I'm not taking care of myself and I lived continuously unhappy, how would I then show up for my family if I'm not first taking care of myself? Even if I had stayed in San Francisco doing the same job, but miserable every day, would I truly be able to show up for my family in a way that I wanted to if I didn't first take care of my needs and followed through with what I need to do first? I guess the reframe of I'm not being selfish, I'm showing up for myself better and doing what I need to do so that I can take care of others.
I like that. And it's so true. We actually talked a bit about this in the prior episode with our guest, April. And they tell you this also on the airplane, right? If you have children and something happens on the plane, you got to put your mask on first before you're able to help others. It's kind of the same concept. You cannot pour if your cup is empty.
Yes.
Going back to the timeline of your story, you go off to grad school, and then you hinted earlier that you end up enjoying your life in Southern California, feel fulfilled, have a lot of joy. And then it sounds like something else happens that triggers you needing to then move back to Northern California. Can you share how this story continues to unfold? I've said in past episodes that sometimes an unfolding is a couple of weeks to a month. It's just a circumstance or a situation that takes a little bit to arrive at. And then there are other unfoldings where it's decades. And we go through that transition and it continues to unfold within the same theme. for many, many years. And it sounds like your story fits the latter. And it's one of the first stories where we're hearing a tangible example of just how different circumstances happen and they require a new evaluation of how you continue to unfold and which direction you go. What happens when you're in Southern California that makes you reevaluate the continuation of that unfolding and move back to Northern California?
So I was down in Southern California for some time, but my mother ultimately had a failed kidney transplant. She was on peritoneal dialysis. It's called when you have kidney failure, and she was able to do that at home. And she was living a fairly independent life. So that allowed her still to travel. She was moderately healthy. She was holding her job. My mom was a strong woman, very strong woman, and she was managing all these health changes, yet she was still living very independently. However, ultimately, she had to switch from peritoneal dialysis to hemodialysis. So what that means is she could no longer take care of her dialysis needs at home, and she was required to go into the hospital about 3-4 times a week to get dialysis done. So that was right around the time when she unfortunately retired, and she thought she'd have all this freedom and ability to travel and do more stuff. But that was another health change for her that really started a decline in her health. Just having to go to the hospital, get your blood washed like 4 times a week, it really fatigues a person and it affects a person's heart. I was at that time still living in Southern California. I remember clearly, one time I was in San Diego, actually, out with friends. She wasn't able to drive herself to the hospital and she needed Uber help, right? She just needed a driver to assist her to the hospital. Thankfully, Uber was around already. And I remember being out with my friends and arranging rides for her, a ride for her to go to the hospital and back, and just being there, taking care of this, but just feeling so guilty and so at a loss because I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I enjoying my life far away from my mother when she can't even get herself to the hospital right now? I was feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling really guilty.
And in the meantime, how's your dad doing?
His impairment was getting worse. He was starting to fall a lot. His mobility was quite limited. This guilt was lingering with me for years, all the years that I was down there. Every time I came back home, every time I saw them, talked to them on the phone. And even my friends would joke because I would tell them every year, oh, I'm moving back to San Francisco. And then everyone's like, no, you're not. Because they're like, you love it too much down here. And I'm like, yeah, but eventually I'm going to have to move back to San Francisco. And they knew it was coming. It eventually was going to happen. But again, that lingering sense of duty and guilt and obligation, it always stayed with me. It never fully goes away when you see your parents and you hear of your parents ailing. And so eventually with the change in her dialysis and my dad's health, I finally had to make the decision to come home. And I did.
Sounds like you made the opposite decision when you initially first moved to Southern California. It was coming to terms with, I need to do this for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then how long were you in Southern California? How many years?
Oh gosh, like 13 years almost.
Then 13 years after being there, it sounds like you had another transition period where you made the opposite decision and you felt like the right thing for you to do at that stage was to return. How did you then come to that decision? Because you took us through the process of making the decision of, hey, I really need to prioritize myself and put myself first, and how you reframed that narrative. Take us through the process of how you then make this other decision to return.
Mm-hmm. I think in my thought, I was like, I did something for myself. I was really content. Great job, great career. And I prioritized myself for 13 years. And instead of being an obligation, instead of it being I was forced to come back, that I really wanted to. It was the time that I wanted to be now here back with my parents and wanted to be here. And so it wasn't necessarily, it was still a hard decision for sure, because again, putting others first now, putting others first before myself. But I felt like it was the time. It was the right time for me to do that. And I've never received pressure from them. I've never once heard my mom and dad say, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing down there for so long?" They would never push me because of that patience, even on their end. It just made me realize that it was time for me to come back and be closer with my family. And I'm glad I did, because about 3 years later, my dad passed of COVID. And had I not made that decision to come back, I would have had, who knows, right? Probably even less time with my dad.
I'm really sorry to hear about your dad, Joey. And what I'm hearing from you is that decision to come back and to return was similar to the decision that you made to begin with to leave, and that it was really aligned with what you felt internally was the right thing for you to do, without any external forces or voices saying to you, this is what you need to do. It really authentically came from the inside, and you listened to that voice. You feel like it was your intuition guiding you in both instances?
Yes and no. Yes, I definitely listened to what felt right. And it was just the timing, and talking to my friends, my community down there, and family up here. I just felt it was the right timing. And so, yeah, it was intuition. I had the gut feeling that what would be the next best move for me was to come back closer to family.
Where are you now with this? Again, sorry to hear that your dad has passed. How's your mom doing? How are you doing? Do you still consider this to be an unfolding for you?
Oh, absolutely. My mom is continued to transition, as I am as well, but her health is ailing more. I'm really stepping into true caregiver role. She's losing her independence. Basic household duties she's not able to take care of. I'm having to, for example, take out the trash for her, take out the bins, wash her dishes. I go home sometimes and I see that there's food that's spoiled, that it's still in the refrigerator, and stepping into further this caretaker role, not even knowing what the next couple years will bring. I'm absolutely still in it.
How are you taking care of yourself? And I would ask, what have you learned through this process and this transition, which has a lot of uncertainty to come? And if somebody is in a similar role where they're transitioning into becoming a caretaker, what kind of best practices can you share?
Great question. I think one tool, being compassionate, but yet not always having to be the rescuer or the problem solver. I think I used to view my mother and I's relationship as I have to step in and take care of everything and solve everything. But now I feel like I reframe this. And now when there's situations that come up, I'm trying my best to be compassionate, but sometimes just showing compassion and offering my presence is enough.
Mm.
And not having to walk into every situation and say, well, how can I change this? And what can I do now? What can I offer now? What are we going to do next? But just being and listening, empathetic listening.
I love that, because what I'm hearing from you, learning to be present and just spend that time with your mom in a situation that may be new to both of you as her health continues to change and evolve is as significant as doing.
Yeah.
And what I mean is doing something to fix. And I'm saying fix in quotation marks.
Right.
That may not need fixing at the moment. Maybe at the moment, what is important is just being.
Yeah.
Just being together and just showing up.
Right. Right. Maybe it can't be fixed, but just being present and being there for her, listening, acknowledgement. I've had to learn this too. Her physical suffering has turned her into a pretty bitter person, like angry. She's resentful. She's pessimistic, unfortunately. And acknowledging when she's being pessimistic or the negativity, acknowledging it, but not letting it completely overwhelm me so that I'm not absorbing all this from her. Maybe she's complaining about something, she's venting. And again, instead of trying to fix it, acknowledge her pain, maybe her frustration, but not letting that take over.
How does one acknowledge the feeling of resentment or bitterness? And then how does one not absorb it?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to learn to do that over the years too, because sometimes like verbiage or certain complaints or certain frustrations that she voices, I feel my body will get heated. I feel my blood pressure rising. I feel hot in the face, clammy, and I think I acknowledge it by being aware of how I'm feeling in the moment when she's saying certain things and checking in with myself. Yeah, acknowledgement towards myself, checking in with my body if there's certain things that are triggering that she says, then realizing that what she's saying and her complaints or her vents, it's coming from a place where she's having certain feelings, but she's not able to voice them in a certain way. Yeah, my mom is not good at talking about any sort of feelings.
I think a lot of people can relate to that in our generation with either our parents or our aunts and uncles, especially in specific cultures where talking about feelings wasn't really something that was encouraged.
Absolutely.
And so then our parents grow up not really having that skill set to communicate openly and be aware of what emotion they're feeling. So instead it comes out through a reaction.
Right. Or performance, right? They might cook a meal for you and show you
To say sorry.
to say sorry or care that way, but they will for sure never say I'm sorry.
It's the action of love versus the communicating. I think it is a true statement that for a lot, not everybody, but for a lot of parents, it's just a lot harder to vocalize both the emotion of I'm frustrated and even I love you. And so it's the actions of, like you said, cooking you a meal, making sure you walk out the door with a jacket when it's a little bit chilly or things of that nature.
Or even asking for help. I don't know about your mama asking for help, but my mama will not ask for help. She'll complain. She'll complain or talk shit. She won't say, hey, can you help me here? I'm struggling. Being vulnerable.
I think that's exactly what it is, because communicating love, frustration, resentment, bitterness, asking for help all does tie back to how to be vulnerable. And when there isn't really an encouragement to do that as a child or as you're growing up, then I think it becomes a little more challenging to be able to do that as an adult.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that second piece. How do you not absorb it?
I mean, it's hard as shit. Because I'm not going to lie, there's days it absolutely affects me. There's certain times where I'm in a great mood and I'm calling my mama to check in and she's like having just a terrible day. She's in pain. She's not feeling well and she's mad at the world. And she says things that are not hurtful towards me, but just hurtful and cynical. And immediately I can feel my mood shift. There's days like that too, but feeling my body and knowing that this is what's happening. I can go through that. I can have that light switch and I can maybe then act in a way that's maybe harmful to me. Oh, maybe I will now lash out at somebody. But just recognizing where I am.
On those days when you're feeling that way, how do you get yourself out of that mood so that it doesn't become a domino effect where then, as you said, you're not carrying on that kind of energy in your interactions with other people?
I can talk about it with trusted friend, relative. My aunt's, like I said, a great resource. I think a lot of my friends know what I have been going through at this point. Doing something for me, working out, going on a run. I love my runs. Doing self-care routines, talking to a friend, having my beloved four-legged canine friend with me, listening to music, healthy tools to cope.
Those are all great tips and things that I'd say a lot of people have access to: going on a run, turning on some music, or just turning to somebody who you feel comfortable sharing what you're carrying and who has a space to talk through it with you.
Yeah. And also setting boundaries. I think I've said this already, if not, physical boundaries with my mother and emotional boundaries. Maybe there are days when she calls me and she wants to vent, and we say, hey, I have only 5 more minutes to talk at this point. Hear her out, but really setting that space and creating that distance when I need that. Because I can't be on the phone with her every day for 40 minutes doing the same thing. I have to set that physical boundary with her. Maybe shorter visits sometimes. If it's really just not a good day, maybe shortening my visit, shortening my phone call with her, making sure I establish with her that limit and emotional boundaries.
Yeah, and I think that ties back to you have to be able to continue to fill your cup in order to keep giving, in this case, to your mom. Sounds like very healthy boundary setting. And I will say, I know Joey very well, and Joey excels at being a really kind daughter. She loves her mom and she really looks after her mom. And it's very admirable because your relationship with your mom, I can feel it.
Aw.
How sweet it is and how genuinely from your heart you show up for your mom.
Right. Thank you so much. And I think even that aspect of reframing the perspective of the good daughter was something that I had to do. That being the good daughter doesn't mean dropping everything at every moment and just showing up for her, but being emotionally available, but also at the same time making sure that I'm taking care of myself too. Because if I'm just constantly just showing up for her and not for myself, I don't think I can forever be that good daughter.
I think that's exactly right, Joey. I think you nailed it. That being a good daughter doesn't mean forgetting your needs
Mhm.
and that you exist, that you can excel at being a good daughter while still looking out for yourself and having that balance of living your life with how you want to experience it, while also still loving on your mama and taking care of her and being available to her.
Absolutely.
Joy, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Oh, you're welcome,
It
friend.
was lovely to have you. I personally know a lot of people who are going through the transition of becoming a son or a daughter to a caretaker.
Right.
So I know that this will resonate with a lot of people. Thank you for sharing some different tools that you've learned along in your process since you've had years of practice.
Right.
So,
Welcome.
yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you again. And to you, friend, the listener, I look forward to continuing to meet you in your unfolding. Until the next one, take care.